Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. And if you're scratching your head and saying, didn't we have a podcast the other day? You would be correct. We had a special episode earlier this week, but this is our usual day, our usual podcast. So we are back today. It is Thursday, May 21st, and we are excited to have you here today. For those of you that may not be familiar with who we are and what we do, the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was formed a little over 7 years ago. We are a small but national nonprofit focused on really trying to shift away from punitive and exclusionary discipline, outdated behavior management approaches, things that ultimately can have a really negative impact on a lot of children, and very often children with disabilities, Black and brown children, kids that already have a trauma history. We're trying not only to end those practices, but also to have an impact in curbing the school to prison pipeline, which is something real that really affects children and families. So if this is your first time here, welcome. We are excited to have you here. If you are one of our returning community members, thank you for being here. It really means a lot to me, and it means a lot. You know, I often see people kind of jump up in the chat or say hello, and it really means a lot to see that you're coming here kind of every time we do a podcast, and you're such an important part of this community. So I want to thank you for being here today. And, every time that you're here with us, we've got a great show in store for you today. We're going to be talking to Jenn Wisdahl and Kristen Eriksen from FASD United, and a really important topic, and excited to have them both here today. Before we get there, though, I want to share with you a couple of announcements. First of all, I want to begin by sharing with you, and many of you are probably already aware of this, but we have had a sponsor here that has been helping us to bring the podcast to you for this year, and that is the Bowman Consulting Group. And Bowman has been a sponsor for our podcast all year long. Bowman Consulting Group is an organization made up of two amazing individuals, Rick and Doris Bowman. And Rick and Doris Bowman have a lifetime career in this area of trauma-informed, neuroscience-aligned practices. They have authored recently a couple of really amazing books. One is Your FBA is a Fantasy, which really goes into the reason a lot of functional behavioral assessments don't work and how to align them with trauma-informed and neuroscience-aligned practices. We also have a brand new book called Facing the Fantasy, Finding the Way Forward. This really dives into a lot of the neuroscience, a lot of the trauma-informed approaches, not necessarily focused on FBAs in particular, but really to give you the background knowledge you need to better understand and support individuals that you may be supporting the work that you do. The Bowman Consulting Group also offers a lot of consultations and training. They have events coming up all the time. They have a lot of free resources, a great newsletter. So I encourage you to check them out. We want to thank them for being a sponsor for the podcast. We have a special link here, which we'll put in the chat as well, where you can learn more about them. They actually set up a special page for our podcast viewers, where you can even get a special discount on the book. They have a 40% discount on Your FBA is a Fantasy, good until June 15th. Also a 25% discount on the other new book, Facing the Fantasy. So I encourage you to check out those resources. Another thing I want to mention, just kind of in the terms of announcements, many of you may be aware there is currently proposed federal legislation called the Keeping All Students Safe Act that would prohibit the use of seclusion, certain types of restraint as well, prone, supine, mechanical, chemical restraint. That is a federal bill that has been reintroduced over many years, and at one point I am hopeful that we will get it passed, but it takes action. It takes action to get legislation passed. I want to encourage you, we have a page set up right now, and it's on our homepage even, that says, tell us why you support the Keeping All Students Safe Act. If you would, record a short 30, 60-second video and tell us why. Tell us why you think it's important to have a federal law that provides consistent definitions and appropriate prohibitions around the use of restraint and seclusion. We would love to share your video on our social networks and with lawmakers and really try to make a difference. The final thing I'll say in our announcement section is that we can really use your help and support. Most of you know we are a very, very small nonprofit, and these are challenging times. I have to be honest with you. We've had some good news recently in terms of some grants and some consulting work that we're doing. but we need the support of donations to keep this work going. And we're in a particularly challenging time right now, so we could definitely use some help and support. You can make an individual donation. You can also become a member. We have membership options that start at just $5 a month. And, you know, when you begin to get a number of people doing that, it can really make a difference and help support the work that you're doing. So with that, we will leave our announcements here and get to why we're really here today. And that is to talk to and learn from our amazing guests. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them up on the stage here with me and say hi to Jenn and Kristen. And let me give you, I'm going to read through both of their bios here to give you a little bit of information about them. And then we're going to have a conversation. We're going to be talking quite a bit today about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. We're going to be talking about the work of FASD United. So keep that in mind as I tell you a little bit more about Jenn and Kristen. So Jenn Wisdahl leads strategy and operations at FASD. I knew I would get the acronym backwards there. United, the national organization supporting people with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and promoting healthy pregnancies, with FASD impacting 1 in 20 Americans. A critical part of her role involves the national legislative and policy agenda for this highly prevalent and under-recognized disability. Using a data-driven strategy that keeps people at the forefront, Jenn has supported substantial growth at FASD United, supporting the Family Navigator Program, National FASD Impact Week, and the return of the International FASD Research Conferences, which has moved from Canada to a permanent home in the United States. Jenn, it's great to have you here, and I'm really excited to have you guys join us today and talk more about the important work that you're doing. And let me also take a moment to introduce Kristen. Kristen Eriksen serves as an FASD, I'm going to say that a lot today, United Family Navigator, as well as a caregiver navigator at Mass FASD, and is a nurse with over 35 years experience, really a varied experience, including pediatric and obstetric. My pronunciation has left me. OB nursing, I'm going to say that right now because my tongue has just kind of gotten twisted here. Early intervention and developmental services with a recent focus on school nursing. Her personal history of raising twins with FASD since infancy has led to a new and different career path, and I can understand that well. After adopting twin infants in 2007, her entire life trajectory changed. Again, I can relate to these things that suddenly happen and change your life. Starting in 2010, she began a long, slow educational process to learn more about the challenges that the twins faced. When they were finally diagnosed with FASD at age 9, her deep dive into FASD began. She began working with Mass FASD and began working as a family navigator at FASD United in 2022. It's great to have you both here today. You know, not everybody that I have on here are people that I've also met in person, but I had the good fortune of meeting you both in person, actually at an event in BC. And it's really great to have you here because there's some intersectionality here that I think is really important to the work that you do and also the work that we do as well. So welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thrilled to be here. So grateful that Kristen was excited and got us involved. And sorry, Kristen, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that intersectionality piece, I think, is so big because there is such crossover and connectivity between the work that you're doing, the really great work that you're doing, and the work that we're doing, and the people that we serve in between. And I think when one of us wins, we both win. We all win. And I really like that approach. So sorry, Kristen.
No problem. I already said I needed to keep myself from being a fangirl because, Guy, I feel like you're you're like, I'm such a fan. And I found you because of your trainings that you did. The first one was supporting all students or supporting something like that. It just spoke to me. And as I, read the description before I went to it, I knew that I would enjoy that training. And then I went to your follow-up one and I shared with all my FASD parent friends that this is exactly what we talk about and preach about all the time. It's using a neurobehavioral lens, and it's understanding our children for who they are. And so that's kind of what led me to you, that then led me to say, Jen, we need to get Guy to come to Impact Week, and he did.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you were very kind, and I appreciate those kind words. Certainly when we first had a chance to connect and learn more about the work that you were doing, I had some stories to share as well about, families that we had supported and really began to see some of the intersection there. So it is an absolute delight to have you both here today. I do want to remind you, if you are watching live and you would like to, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. And I see a couple of people have already jumped in here. And yes, Mike, we are live. But I will let you know that not only are we live, we also make this available after the fact as a recording. So you can go back and you can watch it later. And that's always really helpful, because sometimes you don't have the whole hour or so to spend with us right now, but you'll have the opportunity to go back to YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, or even go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because we make an audio only version available as well. We had Michelle here say that the book is in your cart. That's great. It's a fantastic book. Someone else here saying hello as well. So great to have you here. So again, if you are watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from, because it's always fun to see where people join us from. One of the things that we often see, and I know that you do work kind of all over the globe as well, but we often see a lot of people joining us from Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, India, all over the world. And it's really, I think, it's so powerful when you can share and collaborate and learn from people, kind of all over the world. And, I always appreciate that very much as well. Andy here from Minnesota. Just got another comment here. Just found this group. I was still thinking, yep, okay, in Michigan. Okay, great. Oh gosh, yeah, and some experience here as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. And, in reading your intro, Jen, you said something that I think is really important for us kind of as a starting point. And that is kind of making the point that, FASD is still, it's very, very prevalent, but still under-recognized in terms of a disability. And, given that, I think a really good starting point for us today is to talk a little bit about FASD in general, like what it is, who it impacts, how, and we can get to more of the how later, but why don't you begin, if you would, and either of you, and you're welcome to kind of go back and forth however you'd like to, but why don't you begin by giving us a little bit of a primer on FASD?
Sure, happy to. And Frank, feel free. And sorry, Kristen and I have nicknames for each other. We're Frank and Ernest, because Kristen is frank with me and I'm Ernest with her.
Well, so. I have to tell you a secret, and I don't tell this often. I guess it's not really a secret if I say it on a podcast. My first name is actually Ernest. I don't go by my first name. And to make it a little funnier, if you're at least old enough to remember this, my father's first name is Bert. So just think about that for a second. We were Bert and Ernie. Now, I never went by Ernest or Ernie, but But I once had a boss who used to call himself Frank. So, that a whole nother personality came out. So please give me your very frank and earnest, overview here.
Absolutely. And we do have a slide that kind of goes through a few of these things.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and bring up your deck if you'd like to. And
yeah, that'd be awesome.
This. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yep.
So fetal alcohol spectrum disorders in the US. In other countries, FASD is a diagnosis in and of itself. In the US, we like to complicate things a little bit. And so it is an umbrella term for multiple diagnoses that are lifelong, that are whole body, impacting the brain and the body, but fall under this category of FASDs. But it's really a spectrum. Like it's not, if you see one person with FASD, that's what everybody else looks like with FASD. Mm-hmm. It really is a series of strengths and challenges, support needs that show up in people with FASD. But here's the thing, when you hear about FASD, typically you're thinking that picture that you might have seen somewhere on the internet that's about 50 years old that has the face of the kid, with the lip and the eye. Only 10% of people with an FASD actually have those facial features
Wow.
because they're formed during a very brief window of pregnancy. So FASD is largely hidden. People don't know they have it. And people with FASD can be really, really smart. Wide range of IQs. And IQ does not measure everything. We know that. I myself have 3 kids with FASD. Started out as a foster parent, kind of went through that journey, and my kids are brilliant. I'm sure yours are too. But 90% of people with an FASD have an average to above average IQ. So this is where kind of the challenge comes at, because the expectations based on an average IQ of looking just like everybody else, when the brain processes information differently and the body responds to information differently, that's where some of the challenges come in. So Kristen, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that in terms of the FASD primer, but these do happen when pregnancies are alcohol exposed. And it really can be a small amount of alcohol. It can be a big amount of alcohol. There's no known safe time, type, duration, or period during pregnancy where it's known to be without impact.
If I were to add one thing, I think what I would say, do you want to go first, Guy?
Go ahead, by all means.
Was that I have twins with FAS, and that's one of the diagnoses under the umbrella. And one of the things I say is that knowing one person is knowing one person. My twins are so entirely different. And to think that they have the same diagnosis kind of would make you scratch your head. And, the strengths that one has are not the same as the other. And so that makes it just another thing that makes you scratch your head a bit. And I know Jen would say the same about her children as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that's certainly something that we've heard, I think about autism, and, I've certainly heard, meet one autistic child, and you met one autistic child right there. When we talk about things that fall along a spectrum, it really can be a wide spectrum. The challenge can become in that, very often, a child that, may have low support needs in one area and may academically have a lot of capability, may not be recognized as someone that falls under, something like FAS or autism or whatever the case may be. And very often the focus becomes around behaviors and the child not meeting expectations. So I want to ask you, kind of, given, and you're welcome to share from your own journeys as well as the journeys of those that you've kind of worked with and supported over the years, but, when might a parent or caregiver, begin to suspect FAS or other FASD, other things that would fall underneath that umbrella?
Well, I have my opinion on that, Kristen, and you can tell me if yours varies, but honestly, usually it's right around the 4th grade. Because, and again, some of these things we'll see in early childhood. My youngest didn't sleep through the night until they were 7 years old. I'm only 25. I just look like this due to lack of sleep. There are things you see. There's ADHD, and then there's ADHD with FASD, which is a completely different thing. But really, because one of the challenges people with FASD face is in how information is processed, and it's processing cause and effect. And this is where some of that intersectionality comes in with outdated behavior modification practices or disciplinary practices, right? People with FASD really struggle in general with cause and effect thinking and with abstract thinking. So when you get into the 4th grade, that's right around the time when learning goes from being concrete to abstract. You start moving from concrete examples of things and concrete work to abstract work. And I'm telling you, the 4th grade right around that 9-10 years of age, that's when things start getting really, really challenging for a lot of families. And that's partially why diagnosis typically doesn't happen until a little later on. It's not happening at birth. It's not happening in early intervention necessarily. It's happening a little later down the road once the wheels start to come off educationally. But
what does and let me get, actually, Kristen, let me give you a second. I saw your finger go up there, so let me give you a second to respond, and I've got a question I'll put on hold here.
So Frank is going to say, I pretty much do agree with you, Jen, but the other side to me is that what we end up seeing is everybody has those things that everyone will say, well, that's typical. That's what kids do. And I felt even younger than age 4 that I would say that. And I thought I was an expert, which was my own mistake right there. Right. But everything that I knew about from working in early intervention and in pediatrics and with newborns was, this is something, and I would bring it up and people would say, well, yeah, that's what kids do. But it was always with another, there's more here. And my kids, a little bit younger than that, and this is without knowing about the FASD piece of it at all. And I'm a nurse, you would think I would. And my other point to bring up is that this is not brought up in school. I mean, what we got in nursing school was just that picture, like Jen described, and just a blurb that says they might have some developmental and learning issues. And that's all you got. And so here I am with these kids, and everyone is, I'm saying, I think there's something else. And what we got was a PDD NOS diagnosis at about age in maybe first grade. And this was in Boston at the, one of the big hospitals. Well, you know what it was PDD was actually it was FASD, but nobody put those 2 and 2 together at that point.
So, back to what you said, Jen, that, around 4th grade, that it really would become much easier to see. Are there signs before then that people might see? And it sounds like from what you were saying, Kristen, like there are, but, I mean, of course, and there's a whole umbrella. If we look kind of at neurodivergence, there's a whole umbrella of things that fall under that. And of course, people begin to look at the things that they may know already. And it's easy, I imagine, for people to begin, well, maybe it's ADHD, or maybe, I can imagine even younger children where maybe there's some signs that people are seeing, or some difficulties, anything that people might be, seeing when children are a little bit younger than that threshold that you mentioned.
Definitely looking at it's the ands that you look at, right? It's the ADD and like it just seems a little bit more. It's learning disabilities. Are they having challenges with learning, but they're really, really smart, right? And this could be for a lot of different things, right? But it's also looking at, was there any chance of prenatal exposure, even prior to recognition of pregnancy? Because what we know from the research and from the literature is that as the fetus is developing, right, alcohol at any time can cause changes, structural changes to the developing fetus, because the alcohol travels through the placenta. Fetuses don't have developed kidneys that can filter out alcohol the way you and I can. And when it ends up in the fetus, it causes structural changes, not just to the brain, it can cause changes to the whole body. Kids with FASD are 5 times more likely to have a congenital heart defect than peers that are not prenatally exposed. So there's all kinds of things. So it's when you are looking for, looking at your kiddo and thinking, okay, but there's something else. There's something else, and it's just not explained. And you have that prenatal history. It's like, okay, here's the point of connectivity.
Right. When might a parent or caregiver want to consider an evaluation, and what does that look like? What is, and again, I think about kind of that wider umbrella of neurodivergence, and I think about some of the ways that we evaluate whether something might be ADHD or autism, and some of this is far less exacting in terms of a science than we might want. I recently went through a process with my daughter of having a ADHD evaluation done. And it was an evaluation protocol that was probably really designed well for a 6-year-old boy that had ADHD, but probably not a teenage girl. So tell me a little bit about, kind of the, when a parent or caregiver might think about investigating, and what does that look like in terms of evaluating for FAS and FASD, things that would fall under that umbrella?
My glib answer is get ready to wait.
Okay. But we want the reality. We'll get Frank out for that if we need to.
But let's talk about that. We just did a diagnostic sweep of all the diagnostic clinics in the U.S. And because pediatricians can diagnose with FASD, most won't without a diagnostic clinic to back them up. And because this is a really stigmatized disability, like it's there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of big feelings about this disability. And but when we are looking at the diagnostic clinics across the U.S., there isn't a single state out there that has sufficient diagnostic capacity to screen all of the infants that are born prenatally exposed to alcohol. So that's why I say get ready to wait. But there are multiple different diagnostic methodologies in place in the US. Some of them are a team approach where you'd go in and be assessed by a team of, speech language pathologist, medical doctor, a psychiatrist, they have a kind of a wraparound team. And in other cases, it might be a psychiatrist that diagnoses. It might be a physician that diagnoses. It really depends on the methodology that they're using. And there isn't one kind of set methodology that's in use in the US. But typically it's a team diagnosis. And it's a lot of looking at the physical effects, looking at executive functioning, looking at memory, working memory, social skills, coordination, speech and language, kind of where those peaks and valleys are in terms of support needs and in terms of strengths, because that's what tells the story in FASD. It's not deficit. It's, oh, they're really, really good at this, but whoa, that's way lower than expected. Right. That's what you would see in a diagnosis. There is no blood test. There is no biomarker. This is, you have to have confirmed
prenatal alcohol exposure.
Yeah, confirmed alcohol exposure. And then depending on the diagnostic methodology, deficits in different areas of or support needs in different areas of behavior.
What happens if you can't confirm? I mean, I think about the case of adoption, and maybe there's a case where you don't know the history, but you very might be, might have that presenting you. I mean, so is that something that I don't want to say there's a workaround, but I mean,
yeah. The only workaround really on that one is facial features. If they have the facial features of FAS, then
which is already a minority from what you told me.
Exactly.
Good listening guy.
What's that? Oh, not only am I listening, I'm learning. There's a couple of things I feel like I've already learned here today. So, and this is part of the reason that I love doing these podcasts. If nobody else was watching, I feel like I'm learning something. And we of course do have some people watching, which is great. But I mean, this is really important. And, like many other things, like you said, there's no blood test. Somebody asked a moment ago, no MRI or brain scan either. Not at this point. And of course, who knows how technology and medicine will evolve in the future. But I would imagine it's really critical that if you're going to have an evaluation and you have some reason to suspect FASD, that you need the right kind of professional that understands what they're looking for. Because if you're evaluating just in a general sense and you're used to seeing ADHD or autism, very easily, you could look at the overlap and say, well, this must be what we're looking at. So I would imagine, given some of the challenges here, that there are a lot of children who are probably misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all, because either lack of some of the initial data or lack of recognition. Would that be true?
Definitely. Well, and Jen, I'm going to jump in before you just for a minute because
Please.
I'm going to. So a couple of things. As an FASD United Family Navigator for anyone across the country, you can reach out to us through the Navigator program off of our website, and we cover the world really, but we primarily are in the United States, but we will give you our resources for where are the places that we are finding where they are diagnosing in your state. And also, it's partly looking at a full neuropsych, and partly to what you're saying, if someone goes to an autism center,
right,
they will likely be able to almost probably get an autism diagnosis. I've had many people tell me, oh, well, your kids are autistic, right? And they are not. And I know they're not. They have great eye contact. There are reasons that I know that by that criteria, they're not, but they could, by some professionals, get a diagnosis. Or there's that whole list of diagnosis that includes attention, ADHD, anxiety things. If you just go down that list and you don't get to the bottom where FASD is at the bottom of the list, you're going to get a whole slew of diagnoses, but it's not going to necessarily capture everything that's involved in the FASD diagnosis. Like Jen talked about, the scattered skills in the cognitive profile and their memory lack of memory skills and things like that really do stand out more.
I have so many questions, and as you talk more, I have more questions. One of the things I'm wondering is, so one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is there's even differences that we see in diagnoses when it comes to things like race. You look at two children that present in a very similar way, a white child and a black child, and the white child more likely to kind of get that autism diagnosis versus black child with ODD or emotional disability. Do you see the same kinds of challenges there when it comes to FASD?
Yes. And one of the indicators we say all the time in training is if you're getting the alphabet soup of diagnosis, you ought to consider FASD. If there's just a slew. And the other piece is that, I think I'm losing what I was going to say. It'll come back to me, but then you can go ahead.
You think about like 1 in 20. That is the prevalence of FASD based on active case ascertainment studies done in 4 representative regions of the US where they screened first graders, thousands and thousands and thousands of first graders. And they did not screen kids who were adopted. They did not screen kids who were in foster care.
Kids that might also have additional trauma as well.
Exactly. But they screened those kids and came up with a statistic, and it's like they limited it. They're like, we're going to be conservative in this statistic at 1 in 20. 1 in 20. You think about that. That's a kid in every classroom. Right. So It was interesting. Out of all of that, only 2 of the kids in the whole study had a previous FASD diagnosis. Right. So like underdiagnosed is
1 in 20. I mean, 1 in 20. That's incredibly high.
And I do remember what I was going to add was the foster and adoptive population it has an extremely high prevalence. Is that around, it's in the 80%, I believe, but I don't want to quote a number.
Right.
Yeah, not quite that high, but of the kids who are diagnosed, I believe it's between 70 and 80% are in the foster care system. So it's not saying that 70 or 80% of kids in foster care have FASD. What it's saying is you're more likely to get diagnosed if you are in foster care or adopted than if you are with your biological family. And, you're talking about racial disparities and things like that. By the way, the women who drink the most during pregnancy, they look like me, middle-aged, middle-income, white women with college degrees. So, if you're thinking about, oh, gosh, what woman would do this? Why would they do this? It's me. I'm the problem. It's me. And there's a lot of things that happen around that really there's no room for blame in FASD because a lot of people want to do that.
Right. Something you hit on earlier, and I just want to come back to it and make sure that I understood it clearly. But when we talk about alcohol exposure, how much alcohol exposure are we talking about? I mean, how much, because there's obviously a spectrum. I mean, there are probably people that have, had an occasional drink during pregnancy, and there are probably people that have, drank heavily or, drank heavily until they knew. I mean, how much exposure are we talking about that may result in fetal alcohol syndrome?
So there is no known safe amount, safe
Right.
type, safe time. Now, when you're measuring for diagnostic criteria, there's different thresholds that they measure in terms of, was it binge drinking? Was it X number of glasses over X amount of time that they'll use for diagnostic criteria? But if you think about it in general, that alcohol just isn't good for fetal development. And men aren't off the hook either. There's emerging research that shows alcohol consumption in men and behavioral characteristics in their offspring. So again, that's really preliminary research, and but alcohol just really isn't a good substance.
Of course,
if you're thinking about getting pregnant. And most aren't planned, but
right. Is there a time along fetal development that it is more impactful or less impactful?
Can I show you a slide? Is that
sure,
okay?
Absolutely. You can show me a slide.
I have a slide for this.
All right, awesome. It was almost like this is planned, huh?
I know. Who knew?
Yeah.
But looking at a developing fetus, right? You look at all the things that are developing throughout pregnancy. And then if you look at alcohol, your central nervous system is developing throughout pregnancy. Your eyes are developing throughout pregnancy. Your teeth, your brain, your spinal cord, all of these systems are developing during pregnancy. And then if you look at the typical recognition window of pregnancy, all of these things are happening, honestly, before a lot of people even know they're pregnant.
Right.
And, most pregnancies are unplanned. So really, there's a lot happening during that time that's why they say there's just no safe time, no safe amount.
Right.
It's
and
just
it just means it's why the presentation will be different for everyone because of when the exposure occurs, what's going on in fetal development. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at the central nervous system is completely working on development through the entire pregnancy, that's what can be affected the most. And one of the big things that we talk about is no matter what, there's probably lack of something has made some decrease in potential for learning or for whatever else, could be the case.
Yeah. And you've touched on this, I think already, but, I can imagine there being a lot of shame, guilt, and even on the other side of it, blame, when it comes to FASD. And again, as you pointed out here really clearly, I mean, a lot of, the impact can happen before somebody even is aware that they're pregnant. Yeah. So, go ahead.
Sorry, guy, but here's the thing. We need to be focusing on people with FASD because unless we're going to ban alcohol, and we tried that once as a country, how'd that go? It's not going to happen. Or we're going to ban sex. I don't think that's going to happen either, right? You can't ban sex and you can't ban alcohol. FASD is going to happen. Right. So knowing that, how do we support the people with FASD living in this community? And it's not to say that we don't need to give information out about the risks of alcohol use during pregnancy, but our primary focus really needs to be on the people living with this disability and how they can live their best lives supported in community. And won't that do wonders for the stigma around FASD? Because Kristen's children, my children, they are not a cautionary tale.
Right.
They are not be careful, don't do this or else. No, they are amazing, vibrant human beings with infinite potential to do wonderful, wonderful things if they are supported in the way that they need it.
And when I first met you, Guy, and went to your trainings and listened to what was said, that is why I embraced it so strongly. When I saw someone saying, these are not kids choosing to behave badly. These are children who are not being supported in the way they need, who are their behavior is communication, and people are not listening.
Yeah. You know, I often talk about in presentations I give about children that are misunderstood in the name of behavior, and you know, there's a long list here of children that are misunderstood in the name of behavior. A lot of neurodivergent children, a lot of autistic children, FASD children, a lot of children whose behavior is chronically misunderstood, and misunderstood children are far more likely to find themselves on the other end of punitive and exclusionary discipline, of restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment, all of these things. We're going to get there in a second. But before I do, I want to ask you one last question before kind of leaving the idea around diagnosis. And that is kind of thinking about my own journey and the journey of many that I've known. You know, whether it be anything that kind of falls under that umbrella of neurodivergence, there are a lot of, let me back up. I'm a big proponent of the social model of disability versus the medical model of disability. I don't look through the lens of deficit and disorder and dysfunction and what's wrong with, you know, it's how do we, you know, and you were hitting this a second ago, Kristen, how do we remove barriers to allow people to live their best and their fullest lives? However, we are still entrenched in a very medically oriented view around all of these things. And a lot of times the diagnoses process itself is very entrenched in all of that kind of medical model. Now, I understand why, but my question for you, and you know, I found this to be, you know, particularly true as I look at autism and ADHD and a lot of other, kind of a lot of other conditions kind of under that neurodivergent umbrella. Are there neurodiversity affirming people out there doing work in terms of diagnoses and recognition? I mean, and to me, that makes a difference because, you know, when you're affirming, you're really kind of understanding people and their humanity and who they are and what makes them different. So in the work that you do, are you finding that, or is it still pretty heavily entrenched in, you know, a very medically oriented approach? And again, not to take out the medicine from this, I'm not trying to do that at all, but there's a big difference between, you know, a neurodiversity affirming evaluation and one that is not neurodiversity affirming.
Right. And I think to a large degree, we are still in the medical model there. However, the good news, and one of the things I really love about FASD is that all the evidence-based support for FASD is neurodiversity affirming. All of the interventions that are evidence-based for FASD and really the things that work with our kids, with our young adults, with our families are neurodiversity affirming. Quite frankly, that's the only thing that works.
That's right. That's right. So it's not the behaviorism. It's not the focus on compliance and control. It's when we begin to look for trauma-informed and neuroscience-aligned approaches that are neurodiversity affirming. It's those things that are working. We'll dive into that more in a minute. I want to circle back for a second and get back to probably, you know, when we first, Kristen, probably first had a conversation. One of the things that, you know, I was finding before I connected with either of you was that we have a lot of families that reach out to us. Families of kids that have been restrained and secluded, families of kids that have been subjected to other punitive and exclusionary discipline and practices, families who have children who are being misunderstood in the name of their behavior and really suffering heavily because of it. And one of the things that I began to notice, because honestly, I knew almost nothing about FASD. It was not on my radar until I began to meet parents who were sharing their stories of their children who were being restrained and secluded, who shared with me that their children were, FAS.
Yep.
And it's been, you know, I mean, I don't have any data to support this, but it's been a significant number of families over the years that I've talked to. There are certain types of disabilities that I see much more often in the work that we do. Autism very heavily represented when it comes to restraint and seclusion. ADHD more heavily represented. PDA, FASD as well, though, is more heavily represented in this as well. So I wonder if you might be able to talk me, through that a little bit from, your experiences, from the experiences of those that you supported. Why might we be seeing children that would fall under the FASD umbrella more likely to find themselves on the other end of restraint, seclusion, or other punitive and exclusionary practices?
Well, funny you would ask, but the reason that I found you was technically partly because of that. Both of my children were in regular public school, and it just was not working. And it was third grade, just like Jenn was saying. And we ended up in our first out-of-district placement. And you sign forms that you don't even understand what they're saying. And they say, well, you have to sign this about the rooms they have. And my son went before my daughter did. And when my daughter went, she had a brand new a teacher that was experienced in special ed, but in a regular school setting. And then she switched to this out-of-district school. And I think they were trying to teach her by the book, the behavioral protocols and, under what criterion the child has to be removed from the classroom, whatever. And it was a crazy time for me, third grade, 2 kids that were just very, challenging and a lot of work. And all of a sudden, as I was getting ready around Christmas time for a school IEP meeting, I collected all the papers that I had, and they were about seclusion and restraint. I had over 50 between September and December. And it's making me feel like I'm going to cry now. And it kind of just snuck up on me because of that. And I couldn't handle it. And then I went into the meeting and we had it, and they, talked their piece, and I talked about what I didn't feel comfortable with. And I put the papers down at the end, and I said, I really don't know what to do with this, but this is just not acceptable, because what I'm seeing is this is what happened to my daughter. And this is re-traumatizing her all day long, every day. And so then from there, the next meeting they called right after Christmas was to tell me that they were removing my daughter from that school. They were taking that placement away from her. And so rather than work with me, rather than help my child, she had to go. And so, and it was just ironic to me that then I found you, and it wasn't right after that, but because that was the beginning of exactly where I knew I had to find something enormously different for my kids. And that's when I was learning about FASD. And that's when I was learning that if they start to run, I can't chase them because they're going to, whatever else it was, but I have to sit with them, and I have to re-regulate myself, and I have to have all the sensory strategies, which I had, but really working on how do I connect with them, not how do because you cannot change the child. You have to realize, what is going on, why it is, and then meet them where they are. And then, and that's when I could see all their strengths.
Yeah.
Way more than I ever could before.
And absolutely. I mean, I love that you make this point, and I think it holds true across so many of the families and children that we work with and support. But it really does begin with the adults, whether it be the parent or whether it be the educator. It begins with understanding, it begins with us understanding human behavior differently, seeing behavior differently, because we have, for the last, we have focused on 100-year-old ideas around behavior for way too long. We put far too much focus on rewards and consequences, and all of these things that don't work for so many of our children, so many of our neurodivergent children. In fact, if anything, are what is often leading to the restraint or the seclusion or the other punitive or exclusionary things that are happening. Jenn, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I just, talking about the punishment model and the reward model. And if you ever want to make a parent of a kid with an FASD laugh, show them a sticker chart.
Jenn, you need to see their new t-shirt. I didn't even see it until today. They have the t-shirt for us.
Well, see, the sticker chart. But for a child, for a person, particularly, not just children, because children with FASD grow into adults with FASD. That cause and effect thing. Like if you are managing your classroom based on cause and effect, if you are managing behaviors, quote unquote, based on, if you do this, then this will happen. These are the implications of your actions. These are the results of your actions. when their brain doesn't perceive cause and effect. I made the mistake with one of my kids when I was younger. I made many mistakes with my kids.
We all did.
We all do.
Right, yeah.
I was using the 1, 2, 3 magic and the timeout and the, all the things, right, as we do, and until we know better. And I was, showing my child that, this is a consequence for your action. And they looked at me and they said, "Mommy, why are you being mean to me? Why are you being mean to me? I don't understand." And that was a really defining moment for me too, in that, oh, okay, like what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to teach, clearly I'm not teaching it in the right way.
Right.
Because if what they're getting out of this is I'm being mean to them, and that's their sincere question.
Yeah.
So I think really looking at those practices and looking at changing the environment rather than changing the person.
Yeah. And that's such an important point, right? I mean, I think about, and I'm sure I can extend this and say, there are probably a lot of children with FASD, that fall under that umbrella that have a behavior plan or a behavior intervention plan. And it probably is heavily steeped in rewards and consequences, and it's probably not working either, right? So many of these things that we do, we continue to do, even though they're not working, the sticker charts, the rewards, whatever it may be. There's a different approach that's needed. And I want to get into that in a moment. Before I do, though, I want to take a moment and pause and say, anyone that's watching live, and we've got quite a few people on live right now, I've seen some interaction here. And in fact, I'll just hit a couple of things. As we were talking about this, we were talking about kind of the prevalence, and somebody mentioned juvenile justice. And of course, there's a huge connection here between, disability, whether we're talking autism, ADHD, fetal alcohol syndrome, with children who are on the other side of punitive and exclusionary discipline at school, who ultimately are far more likely to end up in juvenile justice, far more likely to move into the kind of down the school to prison pipeline, and can be more likely to be incarcerated as adults as well. Any research that you've seen related to that specifically with fetal alcohol syndrome?
With fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, one of the big pieces of research we see is that people with FASD are far more likely to be the victim of a crime than a perpetrator of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
However, they are far more likely to be involved in the justice system, in the juvenile justice system,
Mm-hmm.
because they're left holding the bag. They're the ones that maybe don't understand the social connectivity or the social, the cause and effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're with a group, if they're, with a group of friends, they're the ones that are going to get caught for it.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
Mm-hmm.
far more likely to be the victim of a crime than to be the perpetrator of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And, we look at the high profile cases around FASD, and typically they involve some pretty terrible things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a challenge and stigma, because that's not people with FASD.
Right.
People with FASD are not inherently violent or criminal or, have a proclivity towards this or that. And none of the research shows that at all. But yeah, our kids do tend to, due to impulsivity, lack of cause and effect thinking, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, gullibility, because our kids want to trust other people. They want those friendships. They want that connection to community. And when they don't get that in a positive way, they'll take it where they can find it. And sometimes that's really not safe for them.
Want to get to another comment here. And says, my guess is that most moms, dads with FAS, ADHD kids probably have their own level. And this gets you to a question. I mean, one of the things that I've seen happen over the years is I've seen, for instance, in the case of autism, which may have some genetic component to it, but that parents and caregivers sometimes are diagnosed later in life. I'm just wondering if there's any connection there. Obviously, alcohol exposure is really what's key here. But in families that have more alcohol exposure, are their children more likely to be or are they more likely to have a higher rate of alcohol use? So is there anything that we see, in families here from any of this? I'm just kind of curious.
I think a really interesting statistic that I've seen is that getting a diagnosis prior to the age of 10 for FASD is a mitigator for higher ACEs, meaning that you will have lower ACE scores if you get a diagnosis. So having a diagnosis is actually a protective factor from some of those other things that can happen. It is not a automatically your child is at risk for this, this, and this. Yeah, absolutely. There can be some risks. A lot of those due to trauma. Trauma's huge, right?
Yep.
And then if
Yep.
you're processing trauma and not necessarily cognitive of cause and effect, and have difficulties with working memory, and have difficulties with impulsivity, that's a perfect cocktail, as it were,
Right.
for more trauma.
Right.
So,
and I always like to point out
yeah.
that there's a huge intersection between trauma and disability. Being a person with a fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, you are more likely to experience trauma because the world sometimes is not understanding or supportive of what your needs are. And in a world that's not well designed for us, we tend to find that we experience more trauma. So there's a big connection there as well. Andy just said, like how you said, change the environment, not the kid/person. I think a lot of folks change the environment with the expectation that it will change the person. Right. That's kind of a different way about trying to go about the same thing. But we assign blame to the person. It's the person that needs to change. But maybe if we change the environment, that will change it. But often it's looking at the environment for what might be causing the additional stress, the additional difficulty for someone that might be experiencing some challenges. I just want to get one more comment. I'll come back to you. Kelly Rain Collins said, there's current research study looking at FASD prevalence in child welfare and probation populations in San Diego. So some research happening there. I'm sorry, back to you, Kristen.
Well, one thing I was going to add is that I think one of my key aha moments for myself was I always kind of felt like I was arguing with my kids when they were younger. No matter what I said, they were saying, that's not it. It would be what color something is. Is it light blue or is it gray? Is it, black or is it blue? And I found myself repeating, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I'm not. And then I thought about it. I'm like, why are we arguing? And it felt like triangulation, but all of a sudden it hit me with all the reading training I've done that they perceive it differently. So why am I making a point of arguing that? And I changed it to just be like, well, that's interesting. We see it differently. And you know what? That has been like one of the best things I ever do to understand their perspective. It doesn't matter what my perspective is. I have to understand theirs, and then we can have discussion about it, whether we agree or agree to disagree, or, in whatever way it goes from there.
Right. And sometimes at a very simple level, it's about moving away from compliance and control to curiosity and compassion, right? Yes. Asking questions, trying to understand the why. And as adults, sometimes we have a tendency to jump to what we want and when we want it versus really trying to understand what's going on beneath the surface. So I want to shift directions. And again, if you're watching live, you're free to put questions or comments in the chat. I'll hit one more here, and then I've got another direction I want to go. Morgan brings up the troubled teen industry and just says, what can be done to stop all of this in the highly unregulated troubled teen industry programs? And I would have to imagine, and I'm just imagining here, and maybe you know something that I don't, but I would have to imagine that there may even be a higher prevalence of teens ending up in the troubled teen industry that are in fact teens that may have been exposed to alcohol, and may have FAS or some other FASD. Would that be something that you've seen or can speak to?
Yes. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other piece with this too is this is, a huge case for early identification and for supports. It's really unfortunate that the downstream impact is that people are being so misunderstood. Kids
That's right.
are being so
That's
misunderstood.
Right. That's right.
That they're being placed outside their homes because their parents, their families aren't being given the tools that they need. The kids aren't being given the tools that they need. That's a real deficit, and I think there's room for work.
Mm-hmm,
Definitely on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maureen just shared, I was ADHD, late diagnosed, was in the troubled teen industry as well. And sorry about that experience, Morgan. And I'm sure that, I mean, there are so many children that end up kind of going down that road that, because what parents are doing aren't working, and, they're desperate for solutions, but they don't, kind of reflect and realize that if what they're not doing is not working, then it takes a different approach. So let's pivot to that for a second. I want to talk about, and as we kind of near the bottom of the first hour here, I would probably go for a while. I want to talk about something in terms of, and what now? Meaning that, you're a parent or you're a caregiver, and you are, your child was diagnosed with, a fetal alcohol syndrome or a related disorder. What next? What are the best ways? And we've hit on some of that along the way. And Kristen, you've mentioned some of that as well. And I think all three of us could probably share some stories about, like what we learned, when we learned it, and what a big difference it made. But, for a parent out there that's new on this, any of these journeys can be really difficult. What works? And I happen to have my own ideas about that, as you all know, which is kind of moving away from approaches that are very driven in behavior. And, we often call what we do the 5 principles, kind of that trauma-informed, neuroscience aligned, neurodiversity affirming, relationship driven, collaborative approaches. I think these are the same approaches that work, whether we're talking about any kind of neurodivergence. And honestly, they're humanizing approaches to take with any human being. But what do you say in terms of what are the directions and where should we be moving to better support children that are diagnosed with FASD?
Go ahead, Jen. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
And I saw you change slides, so if you want me to pull it up, just let me know.
No,
okay.
This is for later, but
okay.
If we have time, there's one book I recommend. There's many books that are great out there on the topic, but there's a book called Trying Differently Rather Than Harder. So I'll say it again because I think I barked in the middle of that. There's a book called Trying Differently Rather Than Harder. It's a really short book, but it goes through and it's been rewritten. Originally, it was written for FASD specifically. It's been rewritten for really to support neurodiverse people, and it is really looking at shifting how we look at trying. It's rather than trying harder, rather than forcing compliance, rather than looking at the world kind of through that medical model. Here are some quick takeaways that we can do that will help in supporting a person with neurodiversity in a neurobehavioral way. So highly recommend that book as a start. And I think it's going from the parental model of, well, the world is going to be hard for them, and the world, they got to learn consequences. They got to learn the consequences of their action, because otherwise what will happen? Well, you can't learn when your brain is in fight or flight.
Right.
And what is the point of learning that if all it's going to do is traumatize them? Why not set your child up to be resilient, compassionate, strong, with firm boundaries? What might that do when they're faced with the troubles of the world, instead of teaching them, oh yeah, actions have consequences, when that might be something they have a hard time learning?
I'd like to create a world that works for children rather than having the expectation that children have to conform to the world. Like, let's make the world a better place. Let's take some of these approaches and put them in all that we do. Let's not do things to children that we wouldn't do to adults. Let's have high expectations of all children and be there to foster their growth and support. I think it's so important. So often, I mean, I get infuriated when I hear that, like, what about in the real world? They're going to have to learn this. It's like, you know what? No, they don't have to learn all these things. The world is a place that has a lot of ways to accommodate your own individual needs. Like, you don't even have to go to the grocery store if that's overwhelming you. You can get your groceries delivered. I mean, there's so many things that we can do to shape the world to fit our needs, rather than thinking that people have to conform. And that idea around conformity and compliance is just so harmful to so many. Let's embrace people for who they are, right?
Exactly.
Kristen, you have some things to say, I can tell.
Oh, so. I do. Well, for one,
load on me.
My Heather French just put in the chat. She is one of the other navigators, and
Okay.
there's another new book which is fabulous. It's called Crash Course FASD, and it is a wonderful book because it's brief, concise, good for everyone, professionals, parents, and that's a very new book, hot off the press. I also would say that, you know, some of the biggest things that we feel in general are that you as the parents need to get to know your child, relationship first, strengths based, using their strengths to help them along with their weaknesses. I have to put in my plug as a navigator to reach out to us because we have so many resources that we can share and tailor to any particular person. And I share your site and your trainings that people can have. I think schools should take your beyond behaviorism and
some have. We've actually had schools that have bought blocks of it.
Yes,
and we're actually planning another one at some point soon.
And hopefully. I hope that some of them came from me, because I tell parents to share that with their school systems, especially. And it's sad to me, but it's partly because it's autism based, because schools want autism training. We're asking them to have FASD training. They don't see the need for that, but they are aware of autism. And yet it would help. It's supporting all students, correct?
Yeah. You know, we did an event and you referenced it earlier. It was about supporting all brains, right? So it really was focused on, you know, how do we move away from, and even kind of that separation sometimes does more harm than good, because a lot of the things that we can do that are going to really help a autistic child or a child with ADHD or FASD, you know, child, a lot of those things, they share things in similar. They share things that are trauma informed. They share things that we shift our ideas and perspectives around behavior. We inform what we think about behavior by our own biology. You mentioned earlier behaviors communication, and I'll give you a big nod there and say yes, but behavior is biology too, right? Our behavior is really dictated by our biology, and people have unrealistic expectations about any child's development and behavior. But when you begin to layer in FASD or autism or ADHD, you know, there's a big misalignment. And then we end up with this, what Mona DeHello called the expectations gap, right? Where people have expectations of children that are not developmentally appropriate. And then they focus on compliance, right?
Exactly. And that's actually another thing with FASD, and similarly with autism and other diagnoses as well, is our kids typically are dysmature, and we need to meet them where they're at.
That's right.
To bring them up to where they need to be, and we need to give them extra time. Our kids tend to need more supervision than other children their age, similar to autistic children in a lot of cases. And they also need the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Of course.
Food, water, rest, extra, and they need, you know, and repetition way more, and not the expectation. I had so many teachers say to me, and this is when my kids were older, he knows this is review what we're doing right now. He knows it. He just doesn't want to do it. And I'm like, if he knew it, he wouldn't come to me and tell me, I feel so stupid, Mom. And he wouldn't, you know, and he doesn't know it now. It's something in his network connections in his brain. He cannot access it immediately. He needs extra time. And I saw that classically with my son, especially.
You know, the concept of fluctuating capacity is really important. And it's very important for children. It's very important for autistic children, ADHD, you know, FASD, you know, but for any human being, because you and Jen and we all have a fluctuating capacity. Our capacity is not constant. You know, it depends on the stressors that are on us. It depends on the conditions around us. It depends on a lot of things. And because a child can do something in one situation doesn't mean they can always do it in another situation. And we have a tendency really to overlook that and not understand that just because a child's able to meet an expectation on Monday, that they can meet the same expectation on Tuesday if there are things in there that are causing additional stress, if there's related trauma, if there's, you know, other things that are making it difficult for a child. You know, that's why I'm such a big proponent of curiosity, right? Because curiosity is what gets us to finding what's the deeper why and really how to better support individuals. I would guess, and I'm a big relationship person, and I've heard you both mention it already, But I would guess that one of the keys to supporting children that would fall under the FASD umbrella is the importance of relationships. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And we have, as you may know, our community, we have a lot of parents, a lot of caregivers, but we also have a lot of educators, a lot of self-advocates, a lot of school administrators and other professionals. What kind of advice do you or would you give to educators that happen to be in our audience around supporting a child that perhaps in their classroom that fits the FASD profile?
If I can go first, I'm going to.
Go ahead.
And then Jen, I'll let you go very quickly. If there's one thing that is most important, is to listen to the parents that are coming to you and saying, I want to give you ideas of what tends to work with my child. And one of the biggest things is that you need the biggest toolbox in the world, and what will work one day will not work the next. So it's a matter of, of reminding them of that, and that the typical behavioral strategies are probably not going to be effective. They're going to be self-sabotaging, because they're going to look at them and they're going to be having a bad day, and they're going to see, oh, they're talking about a pizza party on Friday. I'm never going to make it to a pizza party on Friday, and it's only Tuesday. And in addition to that is listening to the parents when they talk about they need someone to have a relationship with, and having that consistent person.
An authentic relationship. With.
Yes.
Not a pretend relationship. Like, oh, I love all, I think a lot of children that fall into this profile and others, that authentic piece is really important.
Exactly. And I'm going to add, just because you did mention self-advocates, I know that Andy Corcus is in here, and Andy has done a few presentations for you and is a self-advocate that so speaks the way that we want to hear from the people that are living with it. And we have a lot of that within the FASD community, and listening to someone who has an FASD who can explain what they think and how their brain works is so valuable.
I just to plant a seed here, I'd love to have you guys back sometime maybe and bring a self-advocate or others that might be able to talk about their own experiences. That would be a really great thing to be able to do. Andy's amazing, and really appreciate all that they've done. They've been a volunteer of the Alliance for a number of years, have presented at conferences and written articles, really amazing. A couple of other comments here, 100%, and Kristen, listen to parents. We have another comment here, rather than training legions of workers how to manipulate behaviors. I agreed. We should teach them how to understand and support nervous systems. Mona happens to be one of my favorite humans on the planet, and a lot of wisdom there. And, I would recommend the book Brain Body Parenting, because I think it would apply very well to parents that might be raising children that are FASD. It's not specifically focused in that area, but I think that understanding the brain and the nervous system is really critical to that work as well. So we're getting towards the end of our time here. Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that answer before I get to one other thing?
Really quick, I do, because I think one of the big missing components too is actually listen to the child.
Yes.
And I mean truly listen to them.
Yep.
A lot of time, effort, and energy goes in by parents and by educators to teach children how to self-advocate. The problem is once you've taught them how to do that, you actually have to listen to them.
Yep.
And so when they say, hey, I'm done, or hey, I can't do this, don't see it as oppositional behavior. See that as them actually telling the truth. Hey,
and listen, not let's do 5 more problems and then. No, they're telling you now.
They're telling you now.
The light is going around. The siren is going. Listen.
That, and we talked too a little bit about how there's some dysmaturity sometimes with people with FASD or other disabilities, and I want to be really cautious with that, because there might be a dysmaturity against the norm in certain areas, but not in every area. And my kids, I know, and I've seen this with other disabilities and in other disability rights groups, when the people who are supposed to be supporting people with disability come at it from the perspective of infantilization, That also causes some
Agreed.
huge issues with mental health and the ability to connect and have an authentic relationship where that person is able to take support. So I think we need to be really cautious around how we use the term dysmaturity and how we support the areas that maybe need a little bit more support, and still accept that they are growing and maturing human beings and maybe fully mature in some areas, but need, again, some support in other areas. So just really aware of that piece of the puzzle. And mental health, you can learn at any time during your life. Recovering mental health takes a lot more to do. So
I love that you made that emphasis on, and I agree with you. The number one voice in the room is the voice of the individual, right? Number two is the parent. And I mean, those are really close together there. But, I think always listening to the child is so critical. And, I've had negative self-advocacy stories as well, because I've seen kids that have begun to learn to advocate, and then the adults resenting it and pushing back and like, it's like, no, this is what we want a child to be able to do. But sometimes that happens. I want to hit one more comment here, and we're going to have to wrap up. We're going to be going long here. Shandy said, keep supports and scaffolding in place for students as they age, right? We don't take away supports when things are working, right? I mean, how many times you see that? It's like, oh, everything's fine. We don't need this anymore. Maybe you think we don't need it because it's working, right? Let's not take it away. Supports are needed. Help teachers to understand the nervous system response to stressors is critical, and the ability to access the brain domain needed to do a task, right? Because regulation before education. If we can't, if we're not regulated, if we're dysregulated, our cortex is not there and ready to learn. So focusing on regulation is so critical. So I want to bring up your slide deck real quick, because I think you're going to tell me about something you've got coming up, and then we're going to do our wrap up here. So let me go ahead and bring up your slide deck here. And why don't you tell me what you've got here?
So we have a free conference. Winter conference is free, right? Who does that? We do. And you referenced that you attended it last year. We were so grateful that you were able to join us. FASD Impact Week really is bringing all the people in the room to the table and finding ways to connect, B, plot a course for the future, C, look at policy, D, look at research, really bring the voices together, including the voices of people with FASD and their families, and get everybody in the same room. So we're talking educators, we're talking state agency folks, we're talking clinicians, we're talking clinical disciplines, we're talking researchers, policymakers, everybody in the same room at the same time, talking through, hey, what's next? What do we need to fix? And how can we do that? This year, we're fortunate enough to be hosting Impact Week in collaboration and in concert with the National Foster Parents Association Conference. We have the CDC's FASD National Partner Network attending. We have the couple other associations attending, Association of Parents of Children or Children of Addiction, like just all kinds of stakeholders in the room. The American Academy of Pediatrics is going to be there. Like,
great.
Think about the big table that we could sit for FASD and all the people that could be in place. So we really encourage you that if this touches you in some way, if FASD touches you in some way and you're able to attend, and we recognize not everybody can afford to fly to DC for a conference. That's part of why we make it free, try and level the playing field a little bit. We really hope you'll be there. And we'd love it if you would be able to attend as well, and happy to shout you out on that too. So
absolutely. Yeah, fortunately, I'm in Maryland, so not terribly far from DC. And of course, if you can make it out, come visit the nation's capital. And certainly this is a fantastic event. So look forward to that. So as we wrap up here, I want to give you each kind of a moment for any final thoughts or inspiration. This has been a really fantastic talk. I've sometimes wondered how people have podcasts that are 3 and 4 hours, but I would imagine we could probably do that based on the conversation we've had so far, but we won't today. We'll save that for another day. But let me start with you, Kristen. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave people with as we wrap up today?
I think more than anything, I had such a strong reaction when I first found out about your organization, and everything that you're doing just fits so well with everything that we are doing. And so the idea that, that we were not going to find similar thoughts, and that other families within this organization could be a part of our organization and vice versa. And like I said, we have done work with neurobehavioral model in everything that we do. And your organization was the only place where I found it all just like plunked right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love that. And certainly encourage our audience here, to check them out, learn more about how to become involved. And, I know you've got a tremendous number of resources out there, and, of course, the Family Navigators. There's a lot that can be offered there. And, certainly, I look at it as an opportunity for us to,
yes,
refer people to each other. I mean, when you have people that have experienced restraint and seclusion, I know that, you would connect them to us, and vice versa. It's great to find people that understand the challenges that you're facing as well. So Jenn, you get the opportunity for the final words here today. What would you like to share with us?
There's hope. I think wherever there's community, wherever there's people working together, there's hope. So I think if you are a parent raising a child with any sort of neurodevelopmental disability or neurodiversity, there's hope. There's community, there's support out there. You might not see it yet, and yeah, it can be absolutely hard, but there's hope. And if you're a person with FASD or a person with other neurodiversity, there's hope there too. And I just want to encourage that there is so much goodness in this community. There's so much potential in this community. And, we're not done. We're not done fighting. We're not done growing. I like that term even better. Growing that goodness and that hope. And so if you're not feeling it today, call us. Let us help. We want to help you find that hope, because that's the cornerstone that I think all of this movement is built on. Hope for a better future for people that we love and we care about. And let's face it, we care about humanity.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you're leaving us with a message of hope. And, I'm a firm believer that, when we come together, we can make the world a better place, despite all the obstacles that might be there in front of us. And this is how we do it. We do it by, finding people that are on a like-minded journey. We do it by giving ourselves grace through our own journey and continuing to do better, right? I mean, I'm always guided by those famous words of Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. That's what this is all about. It's about continuing to be curious, continuing to strive to know better and do better for all children, for all humanity. We can leave it at that. I want to thank you both for being here today. I love the conversation. I really, from my heart, appreciate both of you and the work that you're doing in your community and all that you've done, and know that we stand with you and are always ready to be supportive of the work that you're doing. But thank you for sharing with our community today about the work that you're doing and sharing your thoughts and your message of hope. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up here for today, and we'll have to do this again sometime. This was a lot of fun. And sure. Thank you so much,
Guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody. If you would, the two of you stick around, we're going to say goodbye to everybody else, and we will see you again next time. All right. Thank you.